Ocean.
Have a joyous holiday season from all of us at Today.
I believe things happen for a reason, and I hope the long wait of the last 5 weeks will heighten a desire to move beyond the bitterness and partisanship of the recent past. Our nation must rise above a house divided. Americans share hopes and goals and values far more important than any political disagreements. Republicans want the best for our nation, and so do Democrats. Our votes may differ, but not our hopes.
Good morning. Finally, a president-elect. George W. Bush will become the 43rd president of the United States. The transition begins in earnest today, Thursday, December 14th, 2000.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer. Live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
And good morning. Welcome to Today on this Thursday morning. I'm Matt Lauer.
And I'm Katie Couric. 37 days after Americans went to the polls, and now we have a winner. Now it can be said, President-elect Bush.
He is the first son to follow his father to the presidency since the Adamses. The first president, by the way, since 1888 to have lost the popular vote and still win the White House. Bush and the current vice president, Al Gore, spoke to the nation last night after Gore formally conceded in a telephone call. Now this morning, just a few minutes ago in London, the current president offered these words, first on Al Gore.
He spoke for all of us last night. And he did it eloquently and well. And President-elect Bush responded with generosity and kind, I thought, in his remarks. And I think we ought to use this opportunity to let the country come together and try to get the new administration off to a good start.
That was President Clinton speaking this morning in London.
The two speeches last night were the first steps in trying to heal a divided country. And an NBC News Reuters poll out this morning finds that the country is still split over all of this. Many wonder whether the weeks of courtroom wrangling have sown doubts about Mr. Bush's legitimacy. Here's what we found. 59% of the people we spoke with said Bush's presidency is legitimate. 37% said it is not. But when we asked whether the country will come together, 50% said no, 46% said yes. And when we asked about this week's U.S. Supreme Court decision that ultimately ended this drama, 48% said it was politically motivated. 43% said it was objective. Matt?
Katie, we're going to look at last night's speeches from every angle, also look at what's ahead. Let's begin with the man who's covering President-elect Bush. That's NBC's David Gregory, who's in Austin, Texas this morning. David, good morning to you.
Matt, good morning. His mandate in doubt, President-elect Bush seeks to overcome the bitterness of this contested election by reaching out to Al Gore and to a nation, he says, invoking Lincoln, must now rise above a house divided.
My friend, the President-elect of the United States, the Honorable George W. Bush.
It was intended to be a deeply symbolic speech. Bush, the eldest son of a president, before hundreds of supporters in the Texas Capitol, introduced by the state's House Speaker, a Democrat, a signal to a weary country that it's time for consensus.
I know America wants reconciliation and unity. I know Americans want progress, and we must seize this moment and deliver. I was not elected to serve one party, but to serve one nation.
Calling the past 5 weeks a, quote, long and trying period, Bush praised the vice president for his service and convictions. Recalling Gore's concession phone call, which came just 8 minutes before the vice president's address, Bush said they agreed to meet next Tuesday in Washington.
And I thank him for a call that I know was difficult to make.
Promising diligent work on his core agenda, education improvement, Social Security and Medicare reform, and tax cuts, Bush touted his compassionate conservative philosophy.
Together we will address some of society's deepest problems, one person at a time, by encouraging and empowering the good hearts and good works of the American people.
But Bush also appeared humble, mindful of the fact that while he prevailed in the closest election in more than a century, he lost the popular vote.
Whether you voted for me or not, I will do my best to serve your interests, and I will work to earn your respect.
Cheered by supporters in Austin, Bush also received congratulations from foreign leaders, including British Prime Minister Blair, who sympathized in a message to Bush, quote, "It was a long and agonizing wait for you." But now the wait is over. The country's 43rd president, aides say, will resign as Texas governor within days and work quickly to appoint a cabinet now just 36 days before his inauguration.
Aides say Bush will begin his first full day as president-elect in church. And they also say that he is expected to name his top White House staff positions by as early now as tomorrow. And later today in Washington, the government is expected to officially turn over $5.3 million in transition funds and those long-awaited keys to the new administration's temporary offices in Washington. Matt?
That's right, David. They were a bone of contention. David Gregory in Austin, Texas this morning. Thank you very much. Let's bring our Washington bureau chief and moderator of Meet the Press in, Tim Russer. Tim, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt.
We talked about tone yesterday. We talked about how important tone was in this speech. He wasn't gloating. He didn't celebrate a lot. Compassionate, reconciliation. What'd you think?
Actually a bit humble, very earnest, very sincere, and I dare say presidential. Matt, I thought the most important line in this speech was, "I will work to earn your respect." George W. Bush knows that this is an exceedingly uphill struggle for him to achieve the presidency. He does not have a mandate. The Senate is deadlocked between Democrats and Republicans. He has a bare majority in the House. It is going to have to be a centrist, moderate agenda in order for him to achieve anything. He must reach out. That's what he tried to do last night.
You talked about the line you liked. What about this line? Republicans want what's best for America, and then the long pause, and so do Democrats.
He referred to the election of 1800 when John Adams turned over power to Thomas Jefferson, the first peaceful transformation of power in our country's history. And Jefferson at that time said, "We are all Federalists, we are all Republicans," the two major parties at the time. That's what George Bush was trying to do last night. Democrats and Republicans come together. We really have to pull together if we're going to achieve anything.
What do you think about his comments on Al Gore?
I thought they were very gracious and I think somewhat empathetic as to what Al Gore was going through. You know, in the end, these are two grudging gladiators who have enormous respect for each other because only the two of them have experienced the same emotions during the last 35 days.
Well, let's talk for a quick second about performance, not content. They brought him into the Texas Capitol where he had a live audience. So he got to look around the room and address individuals in that audience, which took him away from what we talked about before, that deer in the headlights look of his last address to the nation.
Such an important point. His swagger was gone. He did have a human emotional connection. He was in a Democratic House, introduced by a Democrat, alluded to the late former Lieutenant Governor Bob Bullock, a Democrat. I thought the setting and tone were perfect, Matt, because George W. Bush realizes that he cannot govern with a far-right agenda. He's going to have to govern from the center, and last night personified that. And also, Matt, he has to connect with people on a regular basis and not talk above them. He also demonstrated that last night.
All right, Tim, thanks very much. Sit tight. We're going to talk to you more in this half hour, but right now at 8 past the hour, here's Katie.
Matt, thank you. Vice President Gore also called for unity in his concession speech last night. NBC's Claire Shipman is in Washington with more on that speech. Claire, good morning.
Good morning, Katie. You know, Gore wrote most of this speech himself, and his friends and aides say that from the very beginning, he knew what he wanted to say. One friend explained that Gore understood he had a higher bar than most people to make the case he's not a sore loser, that he can be a good loser. He was determined to be generous, not grudging. For example, very pointedly ignoring the advice of some frustrated Democrats that he not use the word concession.
An emotional moment, and one Al Gore fought to avoid for 5 weeks. But with his family and the Liebermans by his side, he offered a heartfelt and magnanimous admission of defeat. The emphasis, healing the nation and good wishes for the president-elect.
I personally will be at his disposal, and I call on all Americans. I particularly urge all who stood with us to unite behind our next president. This is America. Just as we fight hard when the stakes are high, we close ranks and come together when the contest is done.
He even joked about his now famous retracted concession on election night.
Just moments ago, I spoke with George W. Bush and congratulated him on becoming the 43rd president of the United States. And I promised him that I wouldn't call him back this time.
But Gore pointedly admitted to some frustration, even as he formally conceded.
Now the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken. Let there be